Okay, Hotel family, my name is Brother Ray Ray.
Hotel.
We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of Amos Wilson, El-Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, Brother Hassan, Louis Ray Rivera, the late great attorney at war Alton Maddox, Gil Noble, Minister Khaled, and all the historians, Amos Wilson, Miss Leola Maddox, Professor George Simmons, Ranoko Rashidi. And one thing about Miss Leola, she drove an old car from Teaneck, New Jersey for the UAM. And she would bring her lunch. And she was dedicated to bringing people into the lectures because she wanted to bring people together. And she left us too soon, and she would eat her dinner at UAM. So I always want to bring in and talk about Miss Leola because this is what the Mackey's is about. But for the people that came out, give yourself a great big hand for support. And we always going to try to have these lectures no matter what. But we're going to bring the camera over to the Zoom. We're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. And these books are to help Sababu, African World Info Systems, and the Mackey's group continue the work of Amos. We have Blueprint for Black Power. We have the Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. We have Black on Black Violence, the Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. We also have Issues of Manhood in Black and White. We have the falsification of African consciousness, African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, and S.K. Damiana's Distorted Truth, the Bastardization of African Cosmology. And we are definitely in the New World Order right now, and nobody ever is even thinking about reading Amos's classic, African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order. So Black on Black Violence, the Psychodynamic of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. You hear it all the time, big city politicians, everybody from sun up to sundown, black folks killing each other, and whether it's overseas, whether it's Crips and Bloods, whether it's soldiers of fortune going into other countries via the CIA money as black soldiers, but they don't feel to realize that we are still dominated by white domination. They still control every move that we make, and Amos brings it out in his publications, so we never want to forget that. Because if our minds was right, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing to each other. So I have some publications here. This is in honor of Dr. Ben, Black man of the Nile and his family. Dr. Ben lays out the history of what's going on and how they built the temples and different structures in the land of the black, where they didn't have too many computers. So this is in honor of Dr. Ben, and he left us too soon. Dr. Randy Short, Slavery Mastery. This is Randy Short's classic, and he has a Harvard degree, and he still ain't got a job, but this book is in honor of him. I got this book, Dr. Issa, on Sister Phile's program, and I brought his book, so this is an excellent book, Blacklisted, The Price for Speaking the Truth. Dr. Issa, this is an excellent publication. Also, everywhere you look now, you see the weed spots. The youngsters are smoking weed. The young blacks are smoking weed. The whites are smoking weed. In New York, everybody running. The police can't do nothing with it. They can't stop them. They selling it all over the place. And I want to thank Linda LaRouche in this book, Dope Incorporated, because one of the main culprits behind this phenomenon of medical marijuana is George Soros. And they have set a cabal with this weed and everybody smoking it. In the old days, you used to smoke a little weed and all you was doing was laughing and you're looking for a big giant tuna fish sandwich. Well, those days is over because these people that smoking this stuff, they ain't laughing and they ain't eating. So this book is excellent on that. And also, I want to thank Brother Trust from African Echoes. He did his lecture here on Queen Nzinga, and he mentioned this book, Nzinga of Angola. And this is an excellent publication that Trust was talking about. So we have this, the African Queen Warrior, Queen Nzinga. And I want to also thank Trust and the Friday group African Echoes. This book is African or African American, Black Identity and Political Activism in New York, 1784 to 1861. So I want to thank the African Echo Study Group with Brother Truss and Brother True and them for mentioning this book, and we talked about it this last Friday, so this is a publication we got. I picked it up, so it's an excellent read. They always say if you want to learn about somebody, you buy the books. You get the books on individuals. So I picked this up on everybody's talking about him, Elon Musk. So I picked this book up on Elon Musk, and I'm reading it. So that's that right there. So we got this book right here. Also, in honor of Cynthia McKinney, when China sneezes, from the coronavirus to the global lockdown, and when Donald Trump mentioned how the U.S. called places S-hole countries, well, this is a book on how the U.S. creates these S-hole countries. So Cynthia McKinney, I want to give her with a 1-2 punch, 2 excellent publications. That's Cynthia McKinney, and I tell you, if the people came out in support of Cynthia McKinney, in my personal opinion, she's the only one that basically cared about the people of Georgia. And when she ran for president, nobody even backed it. Matter of fact, they did it in the state of Georgia. So in honor of Cynthia McKinney. The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. They're doing this book at Truss's group on the Know Thyself study group. They're doing the Destruction of Black Civilization. Also, in honor of Louis Ray Rivera and Truss Graham, we also have Jews, God, and History. And in this book, a lot of the events that they say happened really didn't happen. So this book by Max Dumont is excellent. Also, The Manufacturing of a President by Wayne Mansfield, the CIA insertion of Barack Hussein Obama into the presidency. And this is an excellent publication to learn about Barack Hussein Obama. So we got this. This is a big 3-punch, and The man behind the curtain. When you want to know about somebody, you buy the books. George Soros, the unauthorized biography, the life and times of one of the greatest investors in the world. This is one book on Soros, who's behind a lot of the stuff. Book number 2, The Shadow Party, how George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and the 60s radicals took control of the Democratic Party. This is another publication that's excellent. And this is a blockbuster, The Man Behind the Curtain, The Secret Network of George Soros. And these books are readily available on Amazon. You get them and you read them and you make your own decision. Jazz in Jail, in honor of Louis Ray Rivera. Louis Ray Rivera took up the mantle when Professor Mackey left us, and he would come down here and he would speak for an hour and a half, and we would walk him home, and Louis Ray would speak again for another hour and a half. So, this book, Jazz in Jail, is excellent publication, and it's in honor of Louis Ray. We have, they talk about reparations, and there's another study, but they don't have this book, Without Sanctuary. And it shows the hangings. It shows all the publications of the hangings and what they did to us in the South. The postcards, the different hangings and torches, and I don't see why they always coming up with another study in all these books. Another book of African slavery in Latin America and in the Caribbean. This is an excellent publication, and it talks about what happened in the Afro-Caribbean countries. So they was doing us in all over the place. In honor of Dr. Scott Whitaker out of Georgia, his book, Medicine, The Causes and Solutions of Medical Malnutrition and the Medical Sins That Are Killing America. This is Dr. Scott Whitaker's book. This book is excellent. So this is Dr. Scott Whitaker. Also, Ayo Kamati, War on the Horizon. His blockbuster, Jews Are the Problem, and Jews Are the Problem Too, The Psychology of the Jew. We want to thank Ayo Kamati for these 2 books, and he lays it down. So these are excellent. CO-19, the great cover-up of CO-19, Dr. Rand Paul did an excellent book, and if you saw the coverage when they was talking to Fauci and everybody, Dr. Rand Paul was giving it in, and this is an excellent book on the CO-19. Kennedy, Vax versus Unvax, Let the Science Speak. We want to thank Kennedy, and he's in there trying to make some changes. I don't know how far it's going to happen, but we will find out. That's another book right here. We have the Wuhan cover-up and the terrifying bioweapons war. So all these is on children's health defense. The Real Anthony Fauci. And if you really want to know the dastardly deeds of Dr. Fauci and NIH, get this book. Another book, Down the CO-19 Rabbit Hole. Independent Scientists Unmask the Pandemic. So all these books is on children's health defense. Also, Edward Down, Causes Unknown, The Epidemic of Sudden Death, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. And it shows the pictures of the young athletes collapsing on the football field, collapsing, playing. It has the pictures on how all of these sudden deaths, and he connects the dots. So we want to thank Edward Down. So all of these books are readily available. Capitalism on the Ventilator. Another one on the CO-19, and it's not going away. We want to thank Kennedy again. I'm reading this book, The Medical Pharmaceutical Killing Machine, Finding Facts That Could Save Your Life. So this is another book that Kennedy and Children's Health Defense came out. But this is the big blockbuster. This is a book that Pfizer wanted to withhold the evidence for 75 years. They did not want you to know what was going on. And they took them to court. Naomi Wolf, Stephen Brannon, they took them to court, and it talks about everything that was going on with the injections. And Pfizer did not want to tell the public, but they forced them to tell the public. So we want to thank, and they got another book coming out called the Moderna Papers. So this is from Pfizer. The next book that's coming out, supposed to be coming out this month, is the Moderna Papers. I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to read it, but we have that. So these are just some publications that we have. You can get them on Amazon. We have them here for people to look at, and you can get them readily. So we're going to have some, these are some events and some programs that's happening. Thursday, Thorough Black Talk with Tad, Keisha, Ashe, Brother Blacksmith, Sister Mama, and they also have a new addition to that group. I forgot the young lady's name, but it's one of the hottest shows on the East Coast. That comes on every Thursday on Facebook Live, live streaming, and it's an excellent program. Our Philadelphia Connection, Blog Talk Radio, out of Philly, with Sister Empress Chi, Brother Lamuma, El Pollinator. This is an excellent program. Blog Talk Radio comes on Saturday at 10 o'clock, and you can tune in and call in 319-527-6189. That's an excellent program. Ayo Kamati, the Irritated Genie. And I want to also thank Brother Anthony Mohammed out of Birmingham, Alabama, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. We have, they have a program, and the first program from 9 to 10 is Dr. Haru. Dr. Haru comes on from 9 to 10 on Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, and you can actually call in. And then from 10 to 11, you also have Ayo Kamati, Born Near Rising, in that program. And this month, he's gonna be live. He's gonna be live coming on. So Ayo Kamati and Anthony Mohammed, WSYP, just go Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Also, every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, Dr. Halim, Your Immunity Project. The program comes on at 3 o'clock, and they rebroadcast it. It's a Zoom meeting on Your Immunity Project with Dr. Halim. He's giving out some excellent information. Our friends in Newark, Brother Trust Graham, Brother True and the gang, Brother Isgard and everybody. The African Echoes organization has a study group, and that comes on Zoom on Friday at 8 o'clock. And they also give you a double header. They're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. Trust is doing that, but not only that, they give you a double header on Saturday at 1:30, the Know Thyself study group out of Asbury Park. Trust is the mediator of that, and they're doing the destruction of black civilization. So they give you a double header coming out of that group. The Simotap organization with Dr. Mack, Sister Richard Dean, and Betty Dobson. That program, The Minefield, comes on WBAI, and that comes on every Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And we've been going on the protest. I don't know if the listening audience happened to tune in to Netflix. You please tune into Netflix and watch the very disgusting remake cartoon of the Good Times TV series. They have destroyed images in that TV series and put it in the cartoon, and Steph Curry is one of the major finances of this. It's disgusting. So we have been trying to get some allegiance and let the public know, and it's sad that when we went to the protest for the Nets game and for the Knicks game, the average person standing on the line didn't even know what was going on. So we're going to meet tomorrow. We're going to the commissioner's office at 596 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, and we're going to have a protest there to try to stop this disrespect of the Good Time series. So the Simultap organization and other organizations around Brooklyn and New York will be there at Fifth Avenue, and the correct
What time?
that's at 5 o'clock, and that's going to be, I'm trying to find the flyer here. So that's going to be a protest tomorrow. Yeah, so we're going to have, it's going to be at the commissioner's office, and we're going to have to make some clearance on that. So those are just some events, and that's going to be happening. We want to thank the Simultap organization. Also, our powerhouse brother out of Baltimore, Darren Muhammad, State of the City. That Saturday program comes on at 12 o'clock. And that's the State of the City out of Baltimore, comes on 12 o'clock on Instagram and on Facebook Live. So that's going to be an excellent program, and it comes on sometime Wednesday and sometime Thursday. The Netflix war tomorrow is going to be a protest at 645 Fifth Avenue in front of the commissioner's office, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, and that's going to be tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And we're going to try our best to get in there and make some kind of allegiance for them. You should see this cartoon. It's just so disrespectful to black folks, black people. And here we talking about trying to get some reparations. We can't even stop Hollywood from disrespecting us. So what do you think? If you can't stop Hollywood from disrespecting you, what makes you think they're going to give you a quarter? You got to be out your mind. So I want to thank Dr. Mack and the Simultap organization and everybody involved in making this happen. You can view all the lectures of the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club, African Helping Africans. On YouTube, you do your study, you go into the work, you do the research, and if you have a problem with any of the speakers, you can always come down here and ask them anything that they say. So ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker, he definitely has a 11-part docu-series lecture. 11 parts on Burkina Faso and the great things of the Sahel region. Dr. Lewis has been laying it down way before everybody else is jumping on the bandwagon. That's 11-part series that Dr. Lewis is doing on what's happening in Africa. But he's going to do another 11 or 12-part series on the African Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt, and the Moors. This is part 1. He's a good friend of the Mackey's group, African Helping Africans. We're glad to have him. Ladies and gentlemen, give a great big hand to Dr. Arthur Lewis.
Good evening.
I'd like to extend my appreciation to Ray Ray and his crew for being here to put together, to run, and maintain the Mackies to the 3 lecture series. And so I have to extend my appreciation to him, his crew, and all of the individuals who attend, and to our audience. What we're going to try to put together, there's so much information that we need to exchange with each other. And so, in 1 or 2 of the past lectures, there came an issue of the Moors. Who are the Moors? And what did the Moors accomplish? And it was a good lecture, and it opened the door to one of the avenues that we in the African community have to revisit. When we talk about African history, there's so many angles in which you can come at African history. So we decided that we would do a presentation, a follow-up presentation on the Moors that was given here. And the basic rationale and approach that I'm attempting to do with Mackies to the 3 is to start or review African history. People say, what is African history? If you want to define African history as those individual human beings who we recognize as African, that present name of people of color. And as previous speakers already mentioned to you, there's so many time periods in which you could start. It's like one of the lecturers indicated that the genetics show, if you want to accept that the first group of people on earth that we can document were human beings that had what we call pigment in them. And it was also mentioned that pigment is something that is necessary for most living things that are on the earth, whether it's plants, animals, insects, whatever it is, they have some kind of a chemical structure, external and internal, that allows that living organism to communicate and to respond to electromagnetic waves. And you say, what are you talking about, electromagnetic waves? The sun, the moon, the universe, and the stars. And that biochemical structure that is identified in living organism we call melanin. Brother Trust, Elder Trust also indicated to you the types of melanin and how it correlates. And so you ask, people will ask, and you have to give at least some kind of explanation. Well, how do you connect it? Well, we know what they call a circadian rhythm. It's just a term that they put together to indicate that the electromagnetic energy from the sun and the moon regulates animals, but we want to deal with human beings. It wakes you up. When you wake up in the morning, when the sun comes up, wherever you are on the earth, that's the biochemical electromagnetic trigger to wake you up. When the sun goes down, electromagnetic energy drops, it begins to prepare you for the sleep cycle. So there evidently is a wake cycle and a sleep cycle. And when you do whatever studies you want to do, and you will find out that your so-called biochemistry of the human being is with animals too. And you measure, whatever measurement you're going to use, you will find out that those measurements fluctuate with the sun. Your blood pressure, the pressure of your eye, your sleep mechanism is at a certain rate. As the sun wakes you up, those biochemical mechanisms change. So, as an indirect way of trying to indicate to you how electromagnetic energy regulates us. And I'll bring you one statement that a friend of mine mentioned to me when you have this issue of homosexuality or trying to become one of the opposite of what you were born with. He told me, the moon does not recognize a male as a female. So that moon cycle, in animals, after a certain age, that individual who is recognized, born as what we recognize a female, they reach a time, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, that there are certain biochemical changes that occurs in that body of that female. So when it reaches that point, the electromagnetic spectrum of the moon does certain things to that particular individual that the moon recognizes as a female because there's a menstrual period. The biochemical changes occur. There's a menstrual bleed. There's a preparation of the body biochemically for childbearing with the hips coming out. So you put two people together, a person who's born as we know a female and the person we born as a male. And you bring them together and you watch them at 10, 11, 12, 13, that individual that begins to develop breasts, that has the hips, that has the internal organs to produce another human being, that's a female. That person who says he is a female, they develop none of that. That's what my friend said to me. The moon does not recognize a male as a female. So that's the biochemical. There are many of ways to look at it. Whatever set it up, the law of opposites is male and female. Okay, so we understand that in terms of bringing us to think that there are external forces that cycle us. And the way the cycle works is, there's an age. So we now try to give you an understanding that your environment, that sun, the moon, the electromagnetism plays a major role in who you are. Okay, and in that, pigment plays another role. So when someone says to me, what do you talk about an African? That's just a term we use for people who recognize that they come from, and their ancestors come from that physical location you call Africa. But when you begin to do the studies and look at people around the world, you will notice that you are indirectly and directly connected with those parts, those human beings around the world. You're connected now when we know that those group of human beings have been living there. So you take India. For thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of years, there was a group of people living in what is now geographically India. And they still live there. And they're jet black. They call it Adivasi, people of the beginning. So wherever you go, you're going to find human beings with pigment. And most of the people that you find on earth today will be human beings with a certain amount of pigment that you identify as an African, light skin or dark skin. So I just bring that to your attention so you put in your mind what you want to feel about how long you go back. And when they do all of the studies, whatever the studies is done, it always goes back to a group of people who look like you in the mirror. Now, if you believe these cell phones, or when you go back and you punch up, and you say, Taiwan. What's on Taiwan? An island off of Big China. And then the present people who run Taiwan are human beings. They call themselves Chinese, but they call them white Chinese. But they still recognize on the island of Taiwan, there's at least 15 or 20% of the population that is not white. They look like any one of us in the room. And even the white Chinese and the rest identify them as the oldest known people on Taiwan. They look like you. The oldest known people every place else look like you in the mirror. And you say, well, what does that mean? I can't give you the full meaning, but if the statistics show us that, if you believe it, 2% of the world's population is in the United States, whoever is counting. If 2% of the population of the world is living in what you call the United States, half of that population is what the people who run this country, white people who run it, they make the statistics. They admit that 50% of the people living under the geopolitical control of what you call the United States of America, half are white and half are non-white, using their statistics, so that people don't say I made it up or something. Not that they are the ones who give all of it, but let's go with that. So if only 2% of the world's population live in the United States and half of them are white, and they admit the other half is non-white, whether they come from Dominican Republic or not. Then if you go along with so-called census that says that 3% of the world's population live in Europe, 3% of the world's population live in Europe. White people. Not that Europe isn't mixed with so many, but I'm using the definition that these people who use to oppress you. So that if the statistics are correct and the trends are correct, 5% of the world's population right now is what you call white. That means 95% of the world population isn't Trump, isn't Elon Musk. It's you. 95%. And if you go along with the birth rate, white people, who they designate white, and many so-called Arab people have a negative birth rate. Has a negative birth rate, which means each year they're putting less people on earth than was there before. And if you go along with the statistics to say that Africa has 1.4 billion people living in Africa, and there are 1.4 billion people living in what you call China, and 1.4 billion people, whoever's counting, is in India. Let's take those three areas. I can't say what Richard Pryor used the term, how the population increased, but they say in Indian, so-called Indian and Asian population, not here, is positive. They're putting on more people each year than die. So their population is growing. So-called Chinese people, they have a positive birth rate, so they're putting on more people than die. Africa, us, directly us, even though the Indian government in Asia conservatively recognizes to this day that the Adivasi, or the people of the beginning, are direct African. They are the oldest people, and they're jet black. And most of India is people look like us. You got 5, 10, 15% of white Indians, or so-called white, who are running the place. 80-90% of what you call India is us. So even in indigenous government in India, who running the place with their racism, they admit that 90% of their population is you. Adivasi. So when people ask you, we're the largest group of Africans on earth that's living outside of the continent, they always go to Brazil. 80 or 90 million. and or they go to the United States 50 or 60. They conveniently forget that 80% of India is Adivasi. The largest group of human beings who are recognized as people of us, the largest percentage of us do not live in Africa, live in India, in Pakistan. That's you. So I'll give you that concept so that you will understand the power and the staying power. A friend of mine was really a friend of mine, a young person. And he said to me, he's of Indian African. You know, when they brought the people, the dark-skinned people, when the British brought the dark-skinned people, took them out of India and Pakistan and started bringing them to the Caribbean to replace you, who they brought directly from Africa because there were too many revolts. And that's how the so-called Indian, when you mix them in the Caribbean. And he told me he was proud of his Indian heritage. He's parents, one parent is an African, and one parent is an African coming from India, but he doesn't understand that. But the reason we give these talks is just to put ideas in your head to rethink a certain way. It's like Dr. Ben and everybody, all of the people here, and your parents and grandparents are trying to make you think, to help make preservation to the next generation. And he was proud. My grandfather was I have Indian in my blood. And he's proud of the Indian, so-called Indian part, and not so proud of the African part. And don't know that his grandfather coming from India is African. Okay, that's why they make a confusion, and that's why we try to clarify certain concepts and ideas that'll help you in your daily time. So I said to him, I asked him, and this is why we got to do research if you're talking on the board. I asked him, you tell me your great-grandfather came here as an indentured servant. You know, when they take you, you want me to, you know how to give you a contract. I said, do you know the history of India? He don't have a clue. That's why you got to look at. About a year and a half ago, the historians from Britain, the white people who had been in India and Pakistan for over 150 years, and the historians from India and the white people, Indian historians and white people are discussing what the British did. So, you know what the discussion is? The discussion is, the white British says, when we were there, we only killed 40 million of you. So the Indian in India, he said, we got the count, you kill at least 70 million of us. That's what they're arguing. They're not agreeing. They wipe out tens of millions. When we go through the thing here, you will find out the population of Africa. They killed at least 100 to 200 million of us, just like they killed them down here. Okay. Why is that important? And I'll tell you why. The same person, he asked me a question about who was the most important in the society. So I said, do you think that the white people who brought the British, who took you out of Pakistan, India, and brought you here to work in the Caribbean because the revolts of Africans were too much? Do you think if they were killing you by the tens of millions that they bothered to go to your ancestors and say, here's a contract, I'm going to give you, here's a written contract, and it's binding, and you can get out of it. So you don't understand reality. They're killing you by the tens of millions, and you're now telling me that they're going to, you don't know your history. They were brought over here, I say, no such thing as this. Same thing with the United States when you do it. The English, you call Anglo-Saxon, which will do one of they're Germanic people. They came in when a dramatic wave coming down, and we'll go over that. And they came in and started killing down the people who were in that island you call Great Britain, the Scotch, the Irish, the Wales. And then when the English king came over here to establish the 13 colonies, the first group of people they brought over there were Irish, Scottish slaves. They brought them here to work, but they couldn't do the work. So then they went to get us. See, all of this is, and I'm not any more scholarly than any place else, but when you're around Dr. Ben and Shashi McIntyre and all of them, you learn how to start going and thinking and putting it together. So I had to explain to him, ain't nobody gave your ancestors any contract patient. They're killing you by the tens of millions. So that's why it's important when people try to bring you different concepts so you understand a broader picture. That same individual told me, oh, you know, these billionaires, they're the ones who are really important in America. They're running the country. I said, which one? Every billionaire in this country, white. Their grandparents came here in rags. And how does Trump and the rest of them now become multi-billionaires? Well, they come to the country, this fabulously rich country, free land. African built the place. As one of the speakers here, I won't give his name, so aptly answered the question when we asked him. Stolen land, stolen people. So you telling me, if you look at Trump's history, the way they tell it, that his grandfather came from Germany, wasn't no Germany, came through Britain, came in, and came to New York City. Now I apologize if I got the story a little off, but I'm only repeating what they're putting in the public. Came to New York, 16, as a barber, stayed with his sister downtown, and then went to the West. And the money was made in prostitution, heroin, and all the other kind of things. Grandfather come back to New York with the riches. I'm not saying anything wrong with grandfather, but that's how it was. They had, the United States was part of the heroin trade, the opium wars, and that's how the heroin got to the West Coast, and that's how the Chinese got there. They brought the heroin from Asia when the British and the U.S. was growing it, brought the heroin here, and then brought the enslaved Chinese there to build a railroad. Goes back to what will be Germany, but there is no Germany at that point. And was told, according to the records that I read, remember, I'm only reading here from the from the internet. You get the information, so let's tell the story. He wanted to stay there, so the story goes. But they looked at his record and said, you're a draft dodger. You left the country illegally not to be put in the military because Europe was at war. Send him back here. And then people get mad at Trump's grandfather. You see, his grandfather's racist. He had real estate businesses, and then he had a rule that says, don't sell to black people. You know, we weren't black people there. We were niggers and everything else they call it. His grandfather, why are you blaming his grandfather? The United States has a law called Red Line. It's in the book. You see that we advertise the book, How the United States Government Segregated America. So don't blame his grandfather. Your government put in record, you don't sell to black people. You don't give them loans and stuff. So he was just following the flow. He followed what your government said. You don't sell this to this to this to this to black people. So I gotta go. So don't tell me about all these rich billionaires. Then he said, well, who's important in the society? I said, you had one. It's a young 32-year-old boy, young man. He said, what you mean I had one? I said, didn't you tell me your mother died? The most important in any society is the woman to make the babies for the next generation. I got an argument and say, yeah, but the man put the sperm there. But the woman, if you don't have a population that's making new babies, you're going to become extinct. And so I asked and said to him, everybody can have sex, no babies. And what's going to happen in 100 years to this great society with all these rich white people that are rich on paper. And he looked at me, it won't exist. So the most important in any society is the man, the family, and it's the woman. If the woman doesn't make baby, the ball game is over. So that's the logic that I use when I go through these papers to try to present a introduction to you, not as the scholar, but just as Dr. Ben told me. He said, I didn't invent Egypt. My job was to go and present it to you, to open the doors to you. And Doc, it's a good one. Look. So I told my friend, you had one because that connotes she died, as you know that. But you still have her. We all have our ancestors. A couple of years ago, I have a granddaughter, the youngest granddaughter. She's 6 now. At 3, she was at the table at dinner with us. She said, she shook her head. She said, you know, my oldest daughter is about 32, and I'm talking about her daughter, the youngest of the 4 kids, 3 years ago. I said, what happened? Not JJ. She said, my mother and I fell in a hole and we died. Now she's 3 years old. She's not talking about her mother, my daughter. She's talking about her and her other mother. She said, we fell in a hole and we died. And she just sat her head down. Now you explain it away. My nephew told me at a family meeting, one of my brothers who passed early, he visited. I have regular visits with my parents, with my brothers and sisters who died. You communicate, but you don't talk. So my nephew told me 6 months ago, there were 8 of us, 6 brothers and 2 daughters in my family. It was a big family in the South Bronx. Everybody had a big family. Richard Bryan tell you how I got there. And he said to me, my brother right above me, his nickname, Billy. He said to me, my nephew said, Billy told me. Now he's talking his dream, wherever he was, to tell Butch, that's my nickname in the street, that everything is going to be all right. My formal training is general surgery for 1.5 years. 15 years of emergency medicine. Ophthalmology came last, and I've been around the world. I know how easy it is to die. One patient there, I'm in emergency, comes in, we worked on her very fast, and she just looked, and the pupil begins to dilate. Am I going to be all right? Yeah, you're going to be all right. She's gone. I've had out-of-body experiences. When we were in Vanuatu, one of the high priests told us that United States, this is 1980, I was there, one of the priests, not this piece here. He said, United States really messed up Iraq, terrible. It was horrible. I said, yeah. I said, when did you go over? He said, what do you mean go over? He said, I've never been in an airplane. Teleported. See, we are not in our culture. In Vanuatu, there's a certain group of people, when their ancestors died, they put them in the house with them. But we so tied up in the Catholic Church and this church and that doesn't mean any damn thing. We out of our culture. So I just want to bring up that aspect of it, of who we are. Dr. Ben always told us we're distinctly different people. Oh no, we all are. No, you can have African women, people of color, can have children safely in the high 40s. The average so-called human being you call white, we all know about it if you're in medicine, you read. They start having miscarriages and have difficulty at birth by 30. You are different. You're melanin. They don't even got tests with muscles and everything. You're distinctly different people. Whatever that melanin gives you for physical, mental, etc. I've had, and you can talk to a lot of people, you travel, you don't have to travel in no plane, they travel. Then they have a god is called Turaga. When Sister Lily was here, she said Turaga existed at least 9,000 years ago with mouth-to-ear connection, not what somebody wrote. They told us in Vanuatu, be careful at the roundabout. And people in West Africa, they're very... some of the people transform into animals, birds and stuff. So I don't discount anything happen. You go to sleep, you don't have to come up, get up. So I always remind people, be grateful. One, be alive. What you talking about? Try waking up dead. Second, after you wake alive, you want to be healthy. Plenty of people in nursing home. Third, what are you going to do with the day, that day that you have? And fourth, protect your reputation. Critical. To keep some kind of centeredness. So we're not in our society. Okay. So I give you all of these little things because we're going to start reading. Now, I have in the back, you have a map of Africa. So I'd like you, when you get a chance, take the map so that we got to start looking at it. There's another handout on Russia, and we're going to deal with this. And what we have to present, we'll finish in a half an hour so we can have his discussion. So there's one paper on the map, one called Russia, and one is called the United States American Colony 1600. And then the last handout is called The World's 16 Crucified Saviors. There's a book that you can get. Okay? And we're going to read it, as we said, we're going to read it so that the individuals who cannot be here can hear it, or when you go on the video to get the video, so the people who have it in their hands, and whatever they're going to do with it, to review it or to teach in it, you have to do. So we read it for individuals here. And from the information that we're reading, we can use that for discussion. The main thing is the presentation of the material so that we can have a discussion on it, so that we can get ideas and concepts that we all have, that it makes it, give ideas to the people who are watching the video. The most important thing in human society is people. If it's true, the projection of population that Africa will have, if they have 1.5 billion, they may have as much as 1,700,000,000. As much as 1/3 of all the people on earth may live in Africa. And if you count up all the people who are African, you make up at least 75 to 80% of the world. So you don't have to worry because you don't have no paper money in your hand at the rate the economy's going. These people, they're worth 44 trillion. Of what? They print up all this paper. So it's to give you a concept that you've been here the first, because all people on earth have pigment. That makes it you. In that your importance is critical to the survival of the earth and survival of African people, not because you don't have $1 million of paper money in the bank. It's because of your family. The most important concept is your family. So we value life and we value African people. We don't disvalue other people, we value others. So nobody says, oh, you're in the United States and you're the lowest group. Yeah, we suppressed here. We were suppressed in the last 100 to 200 years by the Europeans. And yes, there was an invasion in 7/11 by a group of people you call Arabs. But the Arabs didn't just invade North Africa. They invaded what is now Europe and they invaded what is now Turkey. It was a generalized invasion. Movement of people, not to be singled out to say, oh, you couldn't resist the Arabs. What was wrong with you? You did resist. You got to equally see the Europeans suffered. And the people in what you call Turkey suffered. So let nobody sell you this thing about only African people were down and weren't down. Okay, so the first handout is a handout of the map, a map of Africa. And in the map, they divide it up into the 55 countries that make up so-called independent Africa. Now these lines were drawn by Europeans. When they came to Africa, scrambling and stealing, they were fighting with each other. So they called a conference, the Berlin and Brussels conference. The Germans called them and said, all the European countries who's in Africa stealing, killing Africans and killing each other. We got to have a set of rules on how we're going to divide up the spoils of Africa. And that's what the Berlin-Brussels conference was about. And you can get a list of those countries who participated in the breakup or partition of Africa, the Berlin-Brussels conference, 1885 and 1886. That is critical because that will help you start a consideration of what was the United States' role in this relationship with African people. The United States of America, what is it? They got federated and came as a single so-called country, what, 200 and some 80 years? The United States of America didn't have a relationship with Africans in the slave trade. They didn't have a relation to Africans here in the United States. They were part of the European enslavement because the British brought Africans who were enslaved to their colonies. And the so-called 13 colonies decided to federate itself into one unit to protect itself primarily from the English king and to protect itself from the indigenous people. They didn't get together because of idealism. They got together for protection. The same way in the last 3 years or 4 years, the federation in Central Africa, they call it the Confederation of the Sahel countries. 3 countries joining together, militarily, economically, and other grouped together for their security. Because when Mali, there was a coup that overthrew, that replaced the president of Mali, who were denying his people the ability to live well because he or she collaborated with the English in the United States. So there was a coup that removed that individual in 2020. Subsequent, there was another coup or replacement of the Africans who were not taking care of their people and they were collaborating with the United States and Western powers. Brother Mohammed Touré is now the president. And then there was the next year, 2023, when a group of military individuals replaced the ruling head of state, Bassoum, who collaborated with the United States and Britain. So there were 3 coups. Non-violent in the sense that they didn't go around killing thousands and thousands of people. The military made the change of government because of the existing situation of that head of those three African countries collaborating with the United States in the West. As far as the heads of those three African countries, they were not put in charge through a vote. They always say you didn't vote for them. We voted for the President of the United States this time and before, and who runs the country? 350 million people live in the United States, and the records show that a handful of rich families, 100, and a handful of super rich corporations, Elon Musk is one of them, they run the United States. That handful makes all foreign and domestic policy. So yeah, you voted for them. You are a democracy because you say you voted for them. Are they any less corrupt than any of those three Africans who are heading Burkina Faso, Mali, and Chad, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Nigeria? You didn't vote. Who needs to vote? You got to vote. And the studies show that 90% of all laws and rules and regulations are produced by a handful of rich corporations. So you're not a democracy, because democracy means you, the citizen, you have a say, in a direct say in what laws are made. You don't have a direct say. You have representatives who vote for you. The fact that you have representatives who vote for you is called a republic. The United States is a republic. We don't vote democratically because we don't individually. And then what does the study show? We have the study that 90% of all laws that are made to regulate this country, domestic and foreign, are made by Congress people. Your representative who take $5 billion a year, stuff it in their pocket, and they said in the study that they give to big corporations. $4 trillion. So, all of this thing about a vote, you decide what you want. So you're not a democracy, you're a republic. You are a fascist, because some person, whoever it is, defined fascism to be a fascist. Or the Germans were fascists during World War II. Or the Germans were fascists. What definition did you use? We used their definition. The fascist is when the government and the large, rich corporations and family, when they work together to make all of the domestic and foreign decisions for the country. That's fascism. They defined it. Private, rich corporations and families working with the government, they run the government. This is a fascist government. This is a republic because your representatives vote for you, even though they're taking $5 billion, stick it in their pockets. As corrupt as any African leader, all of them. They look like these white, and they look like some of these. So you're not a republic, you're not a democracy, you're a republic, and you have a fascist government. You have a present president right away, has a multi-billionaire, what's his name, Musk?
Right.
And where did he get his wealth from? South Africa. Why did he come to the United States as a multi-billionaire through Europe? They all got billionaire after stealing the wealth from Africa, the wealth from the Americans. So they're running this place. You're not running it because the president and that person and the corporation run. This is a fascist government. Their definition. So the government is not a democratic democracy. It's not a democracy because you don't vote. It's a republic because you have representatives. And because you now have a president exhibition of that, the president and one billionaire or multi-billionaire, they're running the place every day. So you now have a fascist government. And then the last one is a constitutional dictatorship. You have a constitution, The constitutional dictatorship is the king. The President of the United States writes executive orders. And when he writes the executive orders, that regulates the country. So you saw the President in the last couple of weeks, he showed right orders, he showed you this, showed you this. So you're making laws, rules, and the Congress of the United States says that the rules and regulations are supposed to be made by Congress people. They don't make it no Congress people. Your president and that billionaire, they're running the country. They're exhibiting it to you. So every time the president writes an executive order, Theodore Roosevelt, FDR, Franklin Delano, he writes the executive order number 100, lock up the Japanese, lock them up. Executive order, drop them 2 atomic bombs on those non-white, inferior people called Japanese. Why? Because Japan had already surrendered. The Russians were coming in through the islands, and Russia was going to occupy Japan, and the United States dropped the 2 bombs to tell Russia, I'm the big guy here. Plus, you get rid of some inferior people. So, you are not in a democracy. In a republic, you're in a fascist, constitutional dictatorship. I didn't say it. I'm only repeating the definition. On the radio, so we got the map out. We're going to go to the next page. So on the radio, I heard one of the professors who's a lawyer, and they asked him, brother, they said, how could Congress project people to be the chairman of this committee, the chairman of that committee, the chairman of this? How could they do that? And the lawyer did not give the answer based upon the Constitution. He could have said, well, you know, Adam Clayton Powell, when they realized that he was passing laws for the benefit of all people, especially African-based people, he was elected to Congress, they didn't seat him. Right? The second time he elected him, didn't seat him. So why didn't he tell the brother, you don't understand the Constitution? They tell you in the Constitution, that's why I said you got to look at it, that branch called the executive, not the judicial, it's not the judicial, it's not the president. The legislative branch of the government is House of Representatives and Senate. And they tell you right there, the House of Representatives and Senate makes their own rules. There's no such thing, there's no set rules of what to do. It says right there, y'all get together and do whatever the hell you want. That's why they could take and block Adam Clayton Powell from being seated over and over. To hell with the people. Because that's the way the Constitution was set up there. All the people in the Constitutional Convention, and when they put this paper together, were white, male, Anglo-Saxon. Most of them had enslaved people. And the only 2 issues, the 2 major issues in the Constitutional Convention, 1 and 2, and the Constitution. I am not a constitutional scholar, I am nowhere near it. The constitutional scholars are people who go through all kinds of rigmarole for nothing. Tell the people that the Congress had a right to not seat Adam Clayton Powell because Congress is a clique. Whoever's in, you make your own rules, you select whoever the head, you make your own damn rules. Because somebody should ask President Trump, is it true that you did like most of the presidents come out before you left your first term, you signed and okayed a $4 trillion tax breaks for the richest corporations and richest families? Who made up that financial? The Congress put that together. Trump didn't put it together. Congress sat there, whatever their lawyers, who they pay with, they changed all the rules. Let's give the richest corporation and the richest family $4 trillion tax break. They put it together, those Congress people, because they're getting paid They made the law and Trump signs, because him and his boys are going to get paid $4 trillion. You could have taken all the students out of their debt and give them a fresh start. You could have taken all of the people out of credit card. But why would you do that? If it's true that 5% of the population of this country is doing very well at the expense of the 95%, what are you talking about? Look at your mortgage payment, your taxes, your insurance payment. Wait now. Those insurance papers you sell, every time something happens, they always find a way not to pay you. Always.
California. Those people not good.
Okay? So what good is that? But they drain you. Then I listened to the mayor here. What's his name? Adams. Say on the radio one time. Whenever I heard, he said, we're using your tax dollars We're using your tax, the tax dollars that we collect, we're not using it for the school system. We're not using it for infrastructure. We're using it, we made an agreement with at least 100 rich landlords who's losing their building because there is no tourism and stuff. We're taking $3 or $5 billion of your tax money, make out a contract to house these illegal immigrants in these hotels so that 100 people won't lose them. So I gotta pay like you gotta pay all this taxes. And then I have two grandchildren in public school. They have no books. My two grandchildren 2 years ago was in public school with language, geography, the old curriculum. Public school, they wipe it all out. So now you have a system. And then they want to now tax you more to fix the subway. Okay. So this is what we are facing when you talk about this. So $4 trillion.
Not million, not billion, trillion. That's a lot of money.
This is the United States of America. So Trump signed it, but your Congress people okayed it. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go to one of the handouts, 104, and it's handwritten. I don't have time to type it. It's for the information. It's called the USA America Colonies 1600. See, that's why they don't teach any of this. They don't talk about it, because then you would understand when you live in and what it's about. And I'm going to read it for the people who don't have the handout, because it gives you an opportunity to get your hands on some material, like Munderson and others do the lecture, expose us to where we can get this stuff. That's the whole point. We're educating each other in terms of exposure. And what it says is, took it right out of the basic history of the country. Ain't no, everything here is in the public domain. I don't use anything that's not, it don't make a difference if they sue me, I ain't getting any money anyhow. And it says, U.S. American colonies, 1600. I'm reading down for the people you have it. Take me 2 minutes. Enslaved Irish first, then the Scotch, and then they enslaved the Africans. The Irish and Scotch couldn't handle it. They needed somebody who knew how to grow food, who knew how to do carpentry, who knew how to build houses. The same way Benjamin Banneker and all of these, it's documented that African people physically built these buildings with their skills. The same way Benjamin Banneker, if I got the person's name right, and the Africans here, we built all of the buildings and the White House and stuff. The same way Africans did it, the Moors went in to the southern part, southwest part of Europe, what you now call Portugal, Spain, Italy, France. You did for Europe. You industrialized Europe the same way. If you want to see, before we present the evidence later, you want to see what the Moors, the Africans, who came in there, some were indigenous religion, so-called religion, some were so-called Muslim. When you see what Africans did in this country, to here, you will now see what the Moors did in that whole southern part of France, of what you call Portugal, Spain, France, and in. But they can't give you even the most elementary foundation. Okay, so now this is dealing with the United States of America, give you a simple, one of the many oversights of this country. The Berlin-Brussels Conference, 11/15/1885 to 2/26/1885. 11/15/1884 to February 26, 1885. They got together, the Germans called and said, we got to sit down, stop killing each other. We're killing enough Africans. You think the 10 million that the Belgian killed in the Belgian conquer, that's just one portion. At the end of the presentation, I just went through what are some of the known cities, states, in areas. When you talk about Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, you're not talking about desert. At the time they flourished, that area was rainforest because there's a tilt. About every 9 or 10 years, with the, whatever they say, with the rain and the monsoons and all of that. And you go to the archaeology of the Sahara, there are lakes, there are alligators, there are whales there. And when when we were in Egypt, and we asked Dr. Ben on why the temples and the big structures, they got, what do they call it, the thing where the rain runs off, downspouts, because he says you're here. But 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, this was a flourishing. You see the people on ships, and you notice lions and tigers, everything you know in the central was always well up there. So the greatness of Egypt, you want to see the greatness of what Egypt did? They showed you, all the archaeology and all of the architecture in Europe comes from Africa. Then you could see what the Africans did here in the United States. If they did it in 1600 on, the Moors were there from 711 to 1400. That's what you did for that Europe. We work in glass, stone, bricks, mortar, copper.
From 711 to 1400?
It's approximately, they say, 711, 1400.
Then that means that's before the date they say that, blacks were here in 1600. Remember that thing in the classroom, 1695, that we read about it? That's before then, so we have definitely been here.
Right, but you see, because I don't have thousands of pictures, and I don't have this and that, so I said, let's think it out. You saw what you did. You built piers, you built the ships. What you did to industrialize the United States, look at it, that's what the Moors were doing there. That's what they did there for that time, primarily they were there. Okay? Same thing with Rome and Egypt. Everything you see there is what they got out of Africa, whether it was North Africa, whether it was so-called Egypt. Remember that whole area in northern third of Africa, people had constant trade. There was no desert, Mansa Musa, the whole bit. So rather than me trying to say, Dr. Lewis said this and this, think. Okay, so we're going to go. So the Berlin-Brussels Conference, you got to know. Because the United States Congress people say, why the Africans kick the French out? Because nobody liked mistreatment. Why they don't want United States in? Because they know what United States did. They know what white people did. We know what they did. When we saw something, Martin Luther King, the Black Panthers, they were killing all. They're killing you.
It hasn't stopped.
Okay, so let's look at a snapshot of the United States of America. The first group of people the British brought here were enslaved Irish and Scots. They're the slaves. The second, they went through the European Atlantic trade. They always call it the African Atlantic because they don't want the people to know that they were doing it. The U.S., we're reading down the left column. U.S. participation. Now, think of this, the Berlin-Brussels Conference, all of these top generals and businessmen, they're meeting in these massive halls, and just like they do in Congress, and they sit and they're talking about Africa and how many women they raped, and how much wealth, and how many things we stole out of here. So let's think of that. And so this is what they did. U.S. participation. So when you look at the Berlin and Brussels Conference, they'll give you a list of the countries that actually were there. It's about 17 countries. Russia was one of them, but they didn't take anything out of Africa. They didn't take colonies, they didn't rape it. So when you look at the list, I didn't put the list in that you can look. You know Spain, it's Portugal, any of the Western European countries, if you name, they were there. Portugal, Spain, Italy in the late stage, the Netherlands, German, those are the big guys.
Belgium.
Yeah. Belgium, they all were there. So you don't have to, you can look up the name. So they're now all sitting down. Did the U.S. attend? Yes. The U.S. sent a delegation right there. You check the history. The U.S. participated. John Casson, Henry S. Sanford, and Henry M. Stanley. I think Stanley was the actual diplomat. So the United States sat there. Why did they go? Because the United States, white people here, building the country you call United States of America. These Europeans building up Europe from the wealth and knowledge of Africans. So both are being built up from what they're doing to Africa. So you had 3 delegates there. One was an official delegate. Economic, so why the U.S. there? For economic interest, free access to African resources and markets, administration of Liberia, they took it as a colony. They assisted the German government in Namibia, recognized the Congo Free State, King Leopold, Belgium. All groups of white people getting together, living well. You done kill down, beginning to kill down indigenous people here. You got us enslaved here. They got the Africans enslaved there. The Dutch is going to Asia and Indonesia, bargaining Indonesia to get its oil.
Brother Ray.
The British.
I don't hear anything out here.
You don't hear.
Zoom in.
I'll pause it for a minute.
Wait, he's calling you. Somebody's calling you. He's calling you twice. I'm not here.
Brother Ray.
I sent a text. I sent it on you.
Okay. So, in lieu of that short period of less communication, I'll repeat, takes me 1 minute, the essence. The United States sent a delegate to the Berlin-Brussels Conference in 1884, 1885. Why did the United States send? The United States participated in the European partition of Africa. It was basically so they could work out all of the areas, which area you're going to allow to steal. The Russians were there. The Russians did not take any colonies or do anything. The United States was there with 3 representatives, John Casson, Henry S. Sanford, and Henry Stanley. And why did the U.S. delegates do there? For economic interest for the white businesses in the United States. They were looking for the free access to African resources and markets. They took Liberia as a colony. They assisted the German government, recognized the Congo Free State of the state. Invasion, what was their purpose? Invasion, occupation, division, colonize, rob, and rape Africa. That's essentially what they did. Occupation, 1870, they were able to, somebody made some assessment, to bring under their control 10% of what was Africa. And by 1914, they were in there enough, 90%. Killing millions of Africans. The Germans, the Guardian, okay, well that, okay, we'll drop that. We go up to here, on this left side. So now you know the United States was a full participating in the Berlin-Brussels Conference. We go on this side. The United States of America, 1945, colonial preference. What does that mean? That after World War II, what happened was, World War I, the United States assisted Britain with loans. Britain, UK, paid back those loans with gold. Gold obviously taken out of Africa, wherever else they took it. In 1945, at the end of World War II, the British was broke. So the United States said to their British, English cousins, you can't pay me for World War II, but you can drop colonial preference. So when you go through the books, more detail, the colonial preference was a rule among the Europeans that in my colony I control, I put up the tariffs so high that I block all of the other countries from doing business. I take those resources and keep them for me. I don't share it. So colonial preference was each of the European countries that were in Africa stealing. I have the exclusive right to steal, and I don't want you to get a piece of this. Colonial preference means I have the preference to keep you out.
Monopoly on stolen goods.
Monopoly on what they were stealing. So the United States said to his cousin World War II, you don't have any more gold, but you do have control over the assets of Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. And from South Africa, that give you access to Namibia and Zimbabwe. So United States corporations, we know how the French got in, and we know how the English got in, because when you hear about the Sahel countries are kicking out all of the French companies. These French companies got in because the French put them in because they colonized. But because the United States, only colony they had was Liberia. But Liberia didn't have the fabulous wealth. So the U.S., when you look at the readout, the U.S. at the Berlin, the U.S. at the, what's the conference? The Conference of 1944. Bretton Woods Conference. Said, look, we can rise and you going. You can't pay us in gold like you did in World War I because you don't have, you depleted. But give us access to the natural resources of Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. Okay? And that's how United States companies were able to enter the United States to get a piece of the action. Okay? So when you hear about Africa, what did the United States didn't have any colonies? Yeah, but the uranium that you used to bomb Japan came from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Did you buy it from them? You stole it. Okay? So that's when the United States, after in the 40s, 1940s, their businesses begin to go in to those three countries. That's why you notice that Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa, Zimbabwe, they were under the British, and then the United States influence coming. That's when they call post-World War II. British gave U.S. access to the natural resources of Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa to U.S. corporations. You go down, the American independence movement of the 20th century, the African independence movement of the 20th century, the U.S. opposed and fought against African countries and assisted the European states. So how the United States could say their hand is clean? You fought against us. And the main fight was over Southern Africa. South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Angola, because that's where the fabulous wealth is.
Rhodesia before it.
Rhodesia, yes.
And Uganda.
Right, in Uganda. So the United States company got in for repayment from their British cousins. Now, in a sense, and we'll get into it later, but the main, I might be under sanction on this one. When you begin, if you're going to talk, I got to be very careful what I say here, because these people in this country are so paranoid and they're so wrong for aiding and abetting the genocide of the Palestinian people. Straight out. A country that assisted, okay, I'm going to ask you, and I'll tell you the question and answer when we come on. What country assisted? See, the United States is just now beginning to move into what you call the Middle East. You know, that whole area where all that oil is. The Ottoman Empire, which you call Turkey, they had control that part of, you say the Middle East. The Middle East just connotes that southwestern part, which is now Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, all that area, the fabulous oil.
Sudan.
The British and the French got together, and when Turkey lost the war, they took the British and the French took all of that oil base from Turkey. Oil base that's in Saudi Arabia, Arab Emirate, and you know, the whole thing. After World War II, the United States is just beginning to get its foot in as the dominant country to control the so-called Middle East, that area with the fabulous wealth. There's one country that was partners with the United States, and that country right now, the United States is protecting in that area. You know the country, right? When the United States went in with Britain in 1930s, and Britain said to the United States, I need help in controlling the oil in Iran. So I need your military might so we can steal, it's called the British oil, but they split the oil with the United States. Remember when they were stealing it out of Iran, and then they put I forgot his name, who was elected. It'll come to me. And then they put the Shah in. No, it'll come to me. I'm giving you little pieces, you fill in the pieces. This country assisted the United States. When they put the Shah in, there was a secret service of these three countries that work with the Shah. You see what's being done to the Palestinians now? And how they gang up on you? The three countries that had the British, the US, and the Mossad from Israel. Those three countries worked together to keep the Shah powerful. Three countries.
Australia?
Three countries. Think of Iran, Mossadegh. He was elected president, Mossadegh. And then the United States overthrew him and put in the Shah. You remember that part of history? Look it up. 1930s. The three countries that worked to hold down Iran to steal their oil was United States and US. And the junior assistance was Israel. So Israel assisted them on that. Then when Iraq was fighting against Iran, because Iran was coming powerful, the United States gave weapons to both countries to fight. Who shunted the weapons to Iran to fight Iran? Who shifted the weapons to Iran to fight Iraq? Israel. Who assisted the United States to maintain control over Zimbabwe, South Africa, Angola? Israel. Who brought the atomic weapon to the people in South Africa to threaten the African people? Israel. Israel is the military base for the United States. So they've been using Israel from the Shah all the way up to here. So I don't want to get into that at this particular point. You got to look at the big picture of what is going on.
Is that why
We, go on.
the United States is with Israel now against Gaza? Is that why? Is
Say that
the
again?
relationship? Is that why the United States is backing a relationship that's been going on for years?
Yeah. The largest military base. The United States has 800 military bases.
That's ridiculous.
The largest is Israel. Israel is the size of New Jersey. Okay. You got to look at it. We're finishing here. So what? So you get a snapshot of the United States. They have slavery. You know what they're doing to us, and they participated at the Berlin and Brussels Conference. They fought, the United States fought against African independence. U.S. approved and fought against African countries and assisted the European countries. Now I'm going to go into, at the end, the 5 opium wars. The United States has fought 5 drug wars. And in this page here, in the lower column here, there's a reference that I put here, The Guardian 9/2009. The Guardian used some UN information about drug money saved the banks from global crisis. So they're beginning to tell you the importance of the drug trade, the heroin drug trade. The heroin drug trade that the United States, Britain, and France started putting in on the Chinese, it spread, and most of the people who use heroin in this world, most of the drug trade are white. 95% are white. That's not an addiction. So now we're going to find what are the 5 drug trades that the United States has participated in, according to the records. Yes?
So is there any link between that and what happened with Nikki Barnes? They had the issue in Harlem and the drug trade was, am I just too far?
You have it, but you see, the UN will tell you the importance that they documented on that heroin trade that played a key role in keeping U.S. and some of the European countries from collapsing. Okay, let's look at the 5 drug trade. 1, the first opium war was from 1839 to 1842. It was the King dynasties were fighting the U.S. and the UK. All that heroin that they were growing was growing in sections of India, the Belt something area in England, in Pakistan, India. So the documented production of heroin was by the British in sections of India. And it had to do with trade. The British and the U.S. wanted to trade with China to get the riches of China. It had nothing to trade. It's like the United States today. I tell my children I'm 81 years old. From birth to 1970, I lived in the United States like you, and I saw a prosperous United States, primarily for white people. The United States was making 70% of all of the world's manufactured goods. They controlled directly 70% at least of all the global trade. Africa at that point was in the colonies. Most of Asia was under colonies, the Vietnamese and the rest of them. China was down. So, when you were in 1970, now when you look at it, China industry is back up. Russia's industry is back up. So the United States had the advantage from 1944 to 1970 because of when England, the turn of the century, 1900, the United States was about 90. There were 8 to 9 countries that if you use domestic, foreign, manufacturing capability, industrial base, and military. You use those three. There are 9 countries much stronger than the United States. The United States was 8 or 9. Russia was 1. India was 1. Russia, Germany, the Dutch, the French, the English, the Indian, and African. When you see our thing, when you add up all of that, before World War I, before the 1900, United States was number 10, roughly. Okay? The African countries contributed to that. It was only from World War I and II, when the industrial capabilities of Germany went down, Britain was knocked out, France was knocked out, Russia was knocked out, China was knocked out, a lot of African global industry was knocked out. So the United States came up by default, the most powerful country to make things, because their factories were running. All of those thousands of planes and tanks that the United States was building here, you had 9 other countries that used to build it. So the United States came out of World War II by default number 1.
And what year was this?
Pardon me?
What year was this?
You take it from 1900, when the United States was just beginning to go out to China, just begin to barter with the Philippines, just taking Hawaii, just beginning to steal Mexico's oil, when they were just bartering the Caribbean. Remember, Smedley Butler told you? Okay, that's the area of Smedley Butler is in. He's talking around 1900. The United States is just beginning their colonial power. The rest of these countries are way ahead. But after World War I and II, all of those countries were beaten down, so the United States was the dominant country. They made 70% of everything in the global trade. You know what percentage the United States participates in the so-called global trade? 2%. That's what happens when you're a white businessman, a banker, a Congress, and all of that industrial advantage, you sold it off to China for profit. You deindustrialized. The corporation deindustrialized. Congress didn't say anything. The banks didn't say anything. That's why you're only producing 2% of the global economy, and most of the countries don't even have to deal with the United States anymore. That's part of your collapse that's coming. So they were the big ones. From 1970 down to 2025, they're almost insignificant. That's how much the economic shift has gone. China, Russia is the strongest military force. The United States came out of World War II the strongest military, the strongest banking, military, banking, and political. Economic. United States, England, and France, they created the UN. Nobody, when you look it up and say, who created the UN? They give you 5 countries. US, UK, Britain, France, China, and Russia. UN 1945. Russia never signed the UN. And Russia never signed the Bretton Woods. And the China they put in was Chiang Kai-shek with them. So you had white America, white Britain, white America, Britain, France, and white Chinese. And Russia said, we ain't part of this. They put the UN together. And why do you think of the 7 different grouping of the UN when you look it up? The Security Council is the central one that is responsible for regulating and intervening in international wars.
Enforcement.
Yeah. And who's on the Security Council? The United States, France, Britain, and nationalist China. That's a white man's thing. As soon as they did the UN, they did the Bretton Woods. So when you look up Bretton Woods, the 40 countries, 45 countries that sat in Bretton Woods, the 700 delegates, but 45 countries that sat with Bretton Woods inside, the 45 that signature is on the UN, all of the 4 African countries were there. Liberia controlled by the United States, Egypt controlled by Britain, Liberia controlled by the United States, and South Africa was represented by the white. You had no participation in the UN or the Bretton Woods. And when you look it all up, it's back. So the UN and Bretton Woods were created by white people, as Richard Pryor said, white people, for white people, of white people, for the benefit of white people. That's why the BRICS now are not only shifting economically, they're restructuring the whole political structure. There is going to be no UN in about 10 or 15 years. Most of the world has pretty much gone with Bretton Woods, but we can go into that. So the point is, let's get to these wars. The first Opium War was 1839 to 1842. Who fought it? The UK and their cousin, the US, put military troops and fought the King's dynasty to force drugs on them. So the United States was right there with the opium. The second Opium War, 1856 to 1860, the King, China, against the UK, United States, and France added on to it. They're running drugs. That's who's running the global drug. These three countries.
It was the
The third Opium War was 1945 to 1975, the Vietnamese War, when they were sending all that heroin and stuff back in the bodies. Because that drug money became a vital economic aspect to stabilize Britain and the United States according to the UN. Dr. Lewis did not say it. I'm giving you the record. I'm only the person that said it. It's like we did with the, what you call this, what's this thing with the flu we just went through?
Pandemic.
Huh?
The pandemic.
The pandemic. That's why when I got up there, I told the people, I didn't write this. I took 24 pages the government sent me as a doctor. I condensed the paper and only read you the central things they didn't want you to hear. They do what they want with it. They can't bring the charge that I lied. So you can't get away from it. The UN is telling you this. Okay. So the third Opium War is Vietnamese War. Because they said it. The fourth Opium War is Afghanistan. They went in for 20 years. Why did they take Afghanistan from 2021 or 20 to 20? A number of reasons. From Afghanistan, you can look in, monitor, look at the map. Iran, Russia, China, India, you know, with the space and stuff. They were spying all over all those countries. Afghanistan, like many mountainous countries, had vast natural resources. You think they weren't taking the lithium out? You think they weren't taking the iron? But the biggest thing would take was the opium fields, opium poppy fields. So what happened after the Afghanistan people ran the United States out, whenever they ran them out, a couple of years ago, okay, some of the documents show that poppy was being grown in Afghanistan by the British, a certain amount. When the United States took over Afghanistan, it went up 20-fold. The poppy thing skyrocketed. So it's the lithium, it's the iron ore. You can surveil every people, it's the poppy, the heroin, legal and illegal. After the United States was put out, the Afghan people, according to what they're doing, is much of that land that was used to grow heroin, poppy seeds. The amount of poppy coming out of Afghanistan is down to almost zero. And you know what the Afghan people are using in their agriculture? They're building agriculture to feed their people. They're building dams. They're building other things to feed the people. United States had it to get their heroin. They got them out and now using the place to feed itself. And according to that, they say $3 trillion. That's all of your tax money they spend on Afghanistan. Okay, the fifth Opium War started, give it a date, 2020. And it's still present. What is it? Open southern borders of Mexico. The fentanyl is equivalent to the heroin when you play with it. This drug plays still a major role in the United States through the fentanyl. You blaming China. China produces it. China didn't tell you to put it into your country and addict your people. This country is predominantly addicts from the medical profession and from this. It's a drug country. Okay. We went through the wars. Now we're going to come to the heart of what we're going to talk about. It's 4 pages or 5 pages. You got this.
Russia.
Say that again?
Russia.
Oh yeah, Russia. Okay. We got to go through Russia before we go through here. We'll be finishing about 20 minutes. Made up a sheet of Russia. Now, you can't... Russia, what you call Russia, was put together like the United States was put together, by war. You conquer this one, you put it in, you conquer this one, you put it in. And the white Russians who run Russia, the conquest that they did over the non-white Russians, they work a deal. I'll incorporate you under, they call it Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Let's call it Russia. You look at the map, Russia, you look at the map, okay, no, we can illustrate this. Okay, take this area here. This area, when you're looking on the map, I'm trying to, let's take it this area. Let's take it like this. This is Eastern Europe. No, this is Western Europe, Western Russia, and this is Eastern Russia. Okay? Western Russia borders on what you call Europe. What you call it? The English, the French. That part of Europe you know. So if you look at, I'm looking at a map of Russia. In the east, the western quarter of, you see, I'm looking at the map. The western quarter here of what you call Russia sits in Europe. Somebody made an arbitrary definition that Europe is a continent. Europe is really a remnant of Asia. If you're looking at a large mass you call Asia, that's Russia, China, and everybody in that big cut, right? That's Asia. Africa is everybody in that massive. But when you look at all the major land areas and you go to Europe, Europe is a little appendage off of that massive area you call your Asia. It runs from Vladivostok way over here in the west, 7,000 miles coming this way, you hit Russia. So Russia is United States. Russia runs from Vladivostok in the east, in the west. Excuse me, this is east. The west and the east. Russia runs here. 7,000 miles. Russia is equivalent to almost 2 of the United States. It's very big. It's under the control of white people called Russians. But in Russia, when you look it up, there are about 25 different distinct groups of people that live in what you now call Russia. You can look them up. Some of them are white, some of them are people you call Muslims that look like the people in Saudi Arabia. Then you have all kind of Asians, different types of people.
Black state.
Yeah. So Russia has, let's just say, 10 different distinct ethnic groups. Okay? The white Russian runs the entire Russia. Just like the United States has 50 51 states or something. I don't know if it's 50 or
50.
they got 50 states, right? The central government runs the United States, right? The central government seating in Washington, D.C. sets the rules and regulation for the 50 states.
Yes,
The domestic and foreign.
yes, sir.
In Russia, let's say there are 20 or 22 distinct different people from Putin, from White Russia. But you can see Putin is all mixed up. They're Muslim, what you call Muslims. You have all different types of Asian people, black people. But you got at least 20 distinct groups of people who say, I'm this. You get it? The white people who run Russia, they're responsible for the security of all of Russia. So those 20 distinct ethnic areas, they got 20 distinct ethnic people with their own language, their own culture, their own religion. In Russia, the white people are Christian, Orthodox Christian. When Christianity split under the Romans and under Constantinople, but we go to that. So if we could go and travel Russia, you will see that basically the military, the foreign policy of Russia is run by the whites. But each distinct ethnic group that is not white got their own religion, their own everything. They're totally independent. When the Pharaoh Khan asked for the United States 5 states, only to be run by African people, what did they was told? Hell no.
It wasn't far from.
Whoever, one of them asked for it,
The Republic.
whatever it is, one of them, that's why you here to correct me to give this specific one, it's a concept. One of our leaders asked the government, what was the leader to be exact?
Hell no.
Huh?
Hell no.
Okay. You understand what we're saying here?
They want to see.
A request was asked by African Americans to the government of the United States that we want 5 states for us. You run the foreign policy, but you ain't got a damn thing to do with us. We run totally this. They said no. But in Russia, the 20 distinct people, distinct from Putin, who's a Christian, they got all kinds of religions. They totally run independent. They got their own president, everything. You can't have it. This is a democracy. But Russia, where you have these distinct groups, the Chechens is an area where the Muslims or whatever it is. They had 2 wars with Russia to break away from Russia. We get it, the Chechen War. But they were unsuccessful. So they were kept in Russia, but they have their own president, everything is, you understand what I said? Why is it that African people we can't have, if we a quarter of the population, why we can't have 5 states? Because they don't want you to run your
World, your life.
It's the same with the Board of Education. Professor Mackey told us we started the public education in the United States. When the white people looked in segregation, we taught our own children. We had our own economy. The Board of Ed. So you know what the people did? It's the American government ordered the desegregation, not us. When they broke up, when they prevented us from teaching each other, our own education, we now run our own schools. We had it. We were teaching each other. We had an economy, teachers, drivers, and everything. We were autonomous. We were Americans, but we had autonomy. That's what happened after the Civil War. Half of us got caught in what you call this cropping, this sharecropping. A quarter of us went to the East Coast, got some land, and they took it all away. And another quarter went, scattered where there's Black Washington, when they start destroying everything. Why would we win and had our own independence? Why did they destroy it?
That's what Tulsa did. right?
That's what I'm in Tulsa. You had hundreds of Tulsas
Yeah.
prospering. They didn't allow it. They destroyed it.
California, Florida.
Brought you back into as a citizen, and you got nothing. Okay? So think of Tulsa and think of how many of us were able to get from under the gross slavery, and we ran around this country building the Tulsas. Wilmington was like that too. We built independent everything. In essence, we were a totally different independent country within the United States. And what did they do to it? They destroyed it.
Exactly.
What they do to the educational system?
Destroyed.
You can't have segregation. They broke segregation. They broke it. So a lot of the economy broke down. We have to now travel to white school. Why? Because you were effectively teaching your people. And now you in the public school system in the United States is more segregated and the kids don't have books.
They don't learn.
But in Russia even offered the white Jews an area in Russia to build an independent state. They refused. So this country wants you to be part of the country. So you have to follow the rule and regulation of the people who run it. They didn't allow you, it will not allow you to have one state to totally run your country and nobody bothers you. Because you were prosperous.
Exactly.
So here you have an example of who we asked and they refused.
They suppress it.
We had it. The half of the population that was not caught under sharecropping, they escaped to the West Coast, the East Coast. All that land was us, they took it from you. And then Wall Street, what's the Black Wall Street, Tulsa? You had hundreds of Tulsas. In Wilmington, they destroyed it. We had, effectively, the half of us who broke away from the sharecropping, we effectively had our own independent states. Within the United States, they destroyed it. But in Russia, every one of the 20 ethnic groups run their country the way they wanted, the same way you would run your house. But Russia is a dictatorship. Russia is this. This country and these people are goddamn liars. Okay? We're coming down, and we're gonna get to it.
Doc, we only got
Okay, so let's.
40 minutes left.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to go into Russia, and we're going to do as much as we can here for the time, and then when I get the next session, we're going to take here and add. The sessions that I'm going to try to do is to piece together so that when we finish, you will see that all of Africa was prosperous. It's like Doc told us, right? Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. They controlled the quarter of the northeast of Africa. It was booming. It was no desert. It was trade was from west to east, all along there. More commerce and more everything then. So they just try to make believe see Africa's poor. What was it like before you got here? What was it like before the Arabs got here? The Arabs only came in and took part. I'm going to say you're going to read in a minute. And the Arabs only came and got a little slice of the north and a little bit of the west. But they were also doing it to the Europeans and also doing it to the people in Turkey. So it wasn't that we were so defenseless. What were you going to say, Mundus?
Yeah, African Glory. You're familiar with that. He talks about how the Romans destroyed much of North Africa by taking the lions and other types of animals that were killed in the where they have the people that the fighters.
Yeah.
That a lot of that area was vegetative. The northern region of Africa, the Sahara, there were lions,
Yeah,
all kind of animals that roamed there.
It wasn't.
The gladiators the Roman emperors took those lions to fight with the gladiators in the Colosseum.
Right. When we
That helped to destroy that region.
When we go through an overview, when you talk about Rome, why did you have to take North Africa? You see, what made Rome what it wasn't the northern half. There was nothing in the northern half. The southern half was in North Africa, where the trade, back and forth. You see, when we do the geography, Asia and what they call Asia and Africa was always connected by a land bridge. The Suez Canal was only built, what, 1850? Something like that?
Yeah.
But before that, you can go from what you call Africa, cross over into what you call Asia. A land bridge, okay? Most of the trade, when you hear the Silk Road, almost all of the trade was between China and parts of India with what area? Northeast Africa. It came down to go into northern East Africa. There was not a damn thing in Europe to trade. So the Silk Road is a land thing between China and it comes across, but it was directed to Northeast Africa, where all of these African civilization, the Egyptians and all of them were there. That was most of the trade in that northern half of Africa. Europe was a backwater. And it wasn't until, why France, what's his name? Why the Romans were battling with Carthage. All of these years, Carthage. Carthage was there 200, 300, 400 years long before Rome. Hannibal. So why did you look at Rome, and you look at what Rome was then, all of the agriculture, they control all of the trade. Everything was there. Okay, so we're going to look at...
The Romans in North Africa lived longer than the Romans in Italy.
They wanted the northern part of Africa, but because that's where all the trade was for hundreds and hundreds of years. No. The gold, the gold, the salt, everything. Okay, so we're going to go to Russia. When we cut it, we'll continue with this. This I titled was from the book called The World's 16 Crucified Saviors. And I use it only to list, to give you the idea that most of the world, and to this day, they're polytheistic. All cultures have multiple gods. All the gods had wives. They all had children. And all of the world, and most of the world still, they have a god for this and they have a god for that. When he tells you about the different Egyptian god, the god of the heavens and the god, the world was polytheistic. And the world mostly is still polytheistic. And that was one of the things that I wanted to point out when you talk about how mankind has proceeded and then the origin of Christianity. Okay, how much time we got, bro?
We only got about 50 minutes left.
15?
50.
50? Okay, no, we...
Left on the SD card.
Okay, you stop it. We're going to Russia. Why Russia? Russia is the only known area that is equivalent to Africa. Africa has everything it needs. It shuts down the border. It's got vast agriculture. It has the 8 things that Africa supplies to Europe now and supplies to China. Let me see if I remember this. Gas, oil.
You can sit down if you want.
That's okay. Gas, oil. Gas, oil.
Uranium.
No, uranium's in the other category. Gas,
Cobalt,
oil.
bauxite.
No. Gas, oil, coal, and wood. Gas, oil, coal, and wood. What do they give you? heat. Without gas, oil, wood, and coal, you don't have anything to produce heat, to industrialize it, to keep you warm. Remember, most of the ships, before the Europeans were able to start getting oil out of Asia, most of the warships were run by coal. Okay? So it's that oil that they were able to run their warships and other commerce by, instead of using coal, they use oil. So it's oil is gas, oil, coal, and wood. That's how most countries, you got to have energy, you don't have industrialization, okay? That's what we supply to Europe. They don't have it. We supply that to China. They don't have it. Now China is beginning to diversify its oil from Russia and Iran. But before the last 20 or 30 years, China was getting most of their gas, oil, coal, and wood. The other four things that you supply to Europe today and to China, if you cut that off, they're both finished. Food. United States, Africa has 60% of the world's population. Africa feeds Europe and China. Most of what China gets out of us is food. So what do they give Europe and what do they give China today? Food, fertilizers, minerals. You know, all of the cobalt this and the nickel this and everything, and uranium. Food, physical food, fertilizer to grow food. China don't have any of this. Food, fertilizer, minerals, and uranium. Because almost a third of the world is using nuclear plants. That's uranium. That's where Russia is getting, China is getting all of it. Those are the 8 things that if we lock it down, and that's one of the reasons that Africa is rising fast and Europe is going down, they don't have access to these things anymore. Okay? So, the reason I put Russia in here is because there's a Russian-Ukrainian war, right? But I wanted to attempt to illustrate why Russia, the physical land, is having so much trouble with these white folks in Europe. Because the white folks in Europe want to get what Russia has. What does Russia have? Russia, in that massive area that the whites took over, twice the size of the United States, run by white people, but there are at least 20 distinct people living who are different than white people. You know, their hair and their skin and their religions. The Muslims, you know that. But most of these other countries are polytheistic. So you have at least 20 distinct human beings with their distinct gods and goddesses, culture, everything they do, living peacefully and Russia don't bother them at all. They're totally independent. Totally independent. They got their own governors, the mayors, everything. Like we had, the equivalent is Tulsa. Remember we had our own community? We didn't need white people. We grew our own food. We can't have that self-sufficient.
They came to us for money.
See, they don't want you to see you're important. So what China needs and Europe needs, they've been stealing out of Africa. But if the Europeans are able to destroy the Russian economy now, destroy them, what do they have access to? Russia has this. What these countries have been after, when you read what Russia has been going through, because they want to get in. The stated goal of the United States today is, why is the United States and NATO fighting this war against Russia? They want to take Russia and break it up into 25 pieces. And this company would be able to exploit their oil. Russia has a lot of oil. This company can exploit the coal. And that's what they were doing after we'll go through it later. Soviet Union broke down, and for 10 or 15 years, the West was in on them. They with Yeltsin and stuff, they made all kinds of contracts that allowed the West to get in, to get a lot of these things in their pocket.
The resources for the money.
When the Soviet Union broke down, the Western companies went in, and the Western companies did to Russia from 1900 to, for a 50-year period, the same as the French. You go to Burkina Faso and you go to anywhere, what do you find? You find French taking everything. The French corporations are running everything. So it's the French corporations in Burkina Faso that's draining the country. The stuff that white people steal from other people never come to you. It only stays in the pocket of a handful.
42 minutes left.
Okay, only stay in the pockets of a handful. So when the Soviet Union broke down, there was a period for about 10 or 15 years. Yeltsin was in. At that time, the American, U.S. companies were able to go in with a lot of corrupt people and make joint ventures. And so they were able to get the oil for almost nothing, the uranium for almost nothing, the food, the fertilizer. They were stripping Russia. There was a period of weakness. But Russia got itself together and they no longer can do it. But they're still trying to break Russia so they said it. We are at war with Russia to break it up into 25 pieces. Break the country, like they did to Africa. But Russia and them are strong enough that it's not going to happen. Okay, so let's go through why we put this thing with Russia. Russia is to the Europeans that they were what we were to Africa. Africa was free. They just took and steal whatever they wanted to do. We didn't stop them. At that period of time, 10 years before Putin and them got it, that's what they were doing with Russia. They formed corporations with Russians, and they worked together to loot the place and send everything out. And that's what the Americans were trying to do, to break Russia now, so they can get back in and rape it.
Divide and conquer.
Rape it. Okay, now let's go back. So remember, Russia was built by conquest. Like the United States was built, stealing the eastern part, then they took this from the Indian. You see how they were put together? And now white people are strong. They don't want anybody to break them. We want this government to stand as is, so a handful to be rich. Russia was put together the same way by conquest. Soviet Union. But Russia broke down after World War I and II, kind of broke down. And the United States found a way to get in. For 15 years, they were looting Russia by making joint businesses with Russia. We'll do this, and then they shipping everything out. And Putin stopped it. The same way the Sahel nation stopped the French from stealing their food and everything. So there was a reason why, and I'm going to give you why Russia had a problem with the Europeans. Because the Europeans knew what was in Russia. In fact, during the 1900s, remember when Europe had these kings? You had the Tsar, right? The Tsar was a king, king family, and they had their business connections with Germany. Germany had contributed to building up Russia. England contributed to building up Russia. United States contributed to building up Russia. Because You had that structure in Russia where you had a king, a czar. And they invested in each other. Okay? And for the investment that the English and the French and the rest made with the czar, they helped build up the czar partially in exchange for wood, for gold, for diamonds. The two biggest diamonds the producers are Africa and Russia. So when you look at the natural resources that's in Africa, Russia has the same natural resources, but in a lesser quantity, but it's still big. Okay? So the Europeans, before 1900, they were investing in Russia. They were eating out of Russia. They had wood. They were, just like they were sapping Africa, they were sapping Russia. Okay? Then you had the Russian Revolution in 1917. Two groups were fighting. The one group that wanted to continue to do business with the United States and the West, and another group that says, no, we don't want to do business with them. So I'm trying to give you a background to show you why Russia has had problems with Europeans for the last 150 years. Those Western Europeans, the Americans, the French, the Germans, the English, they tasted the wood, the food, the bread. They were eating good out of Europe, just like they were eating good out of Africa. And the reason they were eating good from Russia is because the big capitalists from the West were in cahoots with the big capitalists from Russia, the Tsar. Okay? What the hell does Russia have that the Europeans will let? Let's go here. A brief. In this corner, Operation Unthinkable. What was Operation Unthinkable? 1945, the British Chief of Staff put up a plan to attack the Soviet Union in Germany. So it was the US, the UK, said, let's put our forces together and invade Russia and Germany. They didn't invade because Russia was too strong. But they had a plan in 1945 to invade Russia. Let's drop down to the second one. Operation Pike, 1930 to 1940. Remember, after World War I and World War II, Russia was the only country that was powerful enough to block the United States. They came out of World War I pretty good shape. They got decimated, but they came out strong. So after World War I and then World War II, the two centers of power, economic and military, was the US and Russia. Okay? Now, the war's over. Russia has a large chunk of what is now what they call Europe. Operation Pike, 1930 to 1940, the UK, the British, and the French, from 1930 to 40, they had planned to destroy the oil facilities of Russia in the Caucasus. Didn't have enough military. We go down. Plan Totality, 1945. Nuclear attack. The U.S. had planned a nuclear attack on the USSR or Russia's 20 to 30 atomic bombs to attack the Russian cities. The reason they didn't attack it, they didn't have enough uranium to make the bombs. They were stealing uranium out of Democratic Republic of Congo. Operation Rollback, 1946. The U.S. reduced USSR influence. How? Covert, espionage, sabotage, subversion. They've been trying to bring it down. Operation Dropstick, 1949. to 1957, planned by the U.S. to bomb with 30 nuclear bombs and 30,000 conventional bombs to target the chief Russian cities and industry. They've always planned to try to destroy, but the problem is Russia was too big. Their armies were stronger than the United States, and they didn't have the bombs.
There's no thing stopping.
Now let's go over to the left. You're right. The first column only talks about a few of the plans that the United States had to attack Russia after World War II. How can we bring them down? This side talks about what the West was doing to Russia before the right. This left side is recent, 1940 to the 50s. After World War II, the United States figured out all kinds of ways to weaken Russia, to get to Russia's resources. Now let's look at a little earlier. Napoleon attacked Russia, called the Napoleonic War. It was Russia against the France under Napoleon. It lasted 6 months. The Germans, the French lost. You look it up, they had a whole, what it is about? Getting into Russia and getting to those natural resources. Second, the Allied intervention of Russia from 1917 to 1945, Russian Civil War. It was Russia was invaded by US, UK, France, and Japan. They actually went in and stayed for 8 years. After World War I, Russia was fighting against Germany, right? But because there was infighting in Russia, do we go communist or do we continue capitalist? It broke out in the Russian Civil War. In 1917, Russia had to pull out of the war. So after World War I ended, in 1970, US, France, Germany, and Japan said, look, Russia is weak. Let's go and invade it. In 1917 to 1925, the United States, France, UK, and Japan, they invaded Russia outright. Excuse me, got their ass kicked. They invaded it. But they were able, the Bolsheviks, the communists, won out and the capitalists lost. So they physically invaded Russia. So Germany versus Russia, World War II. So the Germans, the French tried to get into Russia with Napoleon. The Germans started it twice, World War I and World War II, all to get into Russia, steal. And in between the two World War I and II, there was an Allied invasion. UK, US, France, and Japan, they tried to overthrow Russia. Then you see the first Chechen War and the second Chechen War. And when you read about what it refers to, there's a big part of Russia that's Muslim, because the Russians took over other people. So the United States tried to instigate the Chechens who are Muslims. It's like they now have part of Russia, like there's California, and there's New York and Pennsylvania. We got 50 independent states, but they all come under the federal government. Russia has 25 independent states. They're all totally independent. Russia don't bother them. That's the difference. And one of those states was Chechnya. The United States tried to put the Muslims to do it. It didn't work. And now the Russian-Ukrainian war. The United States' stated goal is they built up Ukraine to attack Russia. So the Russian-Ukrainian war is the United States and all of Western Europe took the Ukrainians, armed them, started killing Russians, so the United States intervened. Russian-Ukrainian war. Still, and the stated goal of the United States government was to invade Russia and break it up into 25 pieces. Same thing they were doing to Africa. Okay, now with the time remaining, I'm just going to read the first page, and we'll continue the second. The World 16 Crucified Saviors. You can buy the book, you can buy, and you can read it.
Percy Graves.
I'm going to read what the beginning says. What is it? And this is giving you an idea of polytheism, many gods, like Egypt had. Everybody in the world was like Egypt. They have a god of birth, and the god of this, and the god of that, right?
Because of the land.
To me, that's real. A god of women, a mother god of this. Not Jesus. Okay, go on, Munderson.
This is really about a savior. So everybody had their savior. So this guy here, it's been said, why does he keep coming back?
Say that again?
The savior.
Yes.
Jesus is the savior. So someone said, why does he keep coming back 16 times? Because the work was never done.
So what you're talking about is the world 16 crucified saviors.
Right.
I can say it, but if you want to tell them what you tell them before I read it, what is the significance of the world 16 crucified saviors when it comes to the concept of monotheism, Judaism, Christian, Islam, as opposed to people have multiple gods? Tell them what you just said about the
The
Savior.
whole notion of monotheism that Jesus represents,
Yes.
right? It's not a new thing.
You say that, but tell them why. Why you say that wasn't the first time our Savior came?
We got 10
Because the
minutes.
work was unfinished. You
Okay.
can't get it right.
Okay,
We got 10 minutes
Yeah.
on the ST. It's gonna be cameras.
no.
gonna go
Okay,
out.
so I'm just going to read this in preview. The next section is going to be dealing with polytheism. The world 16 crucified saviors. What it says in essence, let me read it to you first, what this author put in, and then we'll interpret it. The world 16 crucified saviors. More than 20 claims of this kind were crucified saviors. That a God came to save people, right? You understand what Munderson said? That's what the crucified savior. Their savior came down. The God sent down one of their people, their gods, to save you. And that God got what?
Crucified.
Crucified. But he's contending that the story that we take in as Christian, Muslim, and Jews, that's not unique. And that's what he's documenting here. More than 20 claims of this kind, claims of being invested with divine honor, deified, have come forward and presented themselves at the bar of the world with the credentials to contest the version of Christianity. People say, Christianity? You're telling people that Jesus came is the first time there was a God sent down to save you? He said, no, I'm going to give you some documentation that there may have been other gods sent down to save man. And that's the whole purpose of the 16 crucified. And that's going to be the entrance to the polytheism.
So there's more than one God.
Okay. To contest the version of Christianity in having proclaimed Jesus Christ, the only Son and sent of God, 20 Messiahs, Saviors, and sons of God. What he's saying is, we know of at least 16 stories that are present around in Africa and Asia and the world. So it wasn't just the Egyptians or the Nubians or the Ethiopians. We're not trying to say who had what first. But when he talks about polytheism, He's talking about the fact that that whole area of Africa, all of Asia, everybody had a crucified Savior story. Many religions had that central concept that the gods had to send down one of them to work with. They only send down a male god. We can get the names among us and us can get the name. They send down, there's a god sent down to take care of women to help them with pregnancy. There's another god sent down to help them with farming. They were practical. I'm polytheistic. I'm going with this. I'm going with everything. I got a mother, the father, the aunt, the uncle. They're real. This polytheism is real. So he's saying there's at least, and over here, he's giving you a list of what they have found of the different people. Everybody in Africa, everybody in Asia, everybody in the world had a crucified Savior. And Jesus, as Dr. Ben say, in this area, Jesus was just the last. So let's go on.
Doc,
Okay.
you got 20 minutes.
Okay, I'm finishing up in 5. It'll take me 5 here,
Okay,
and that's
go
it.
ahead.
20 of God. He's saying we know of stories still existing. Because all polytheistic religions, and the Yoruba, you know how many gods they got? If I can find it, you know how many?
Stick with this.
They got 6,000 gods. Okay, so let's look. Okay, you get the concept.
Krishna.
Okay, the 20 messiahs, saviors, and sons of God. The only Son of God. 20 messiahs, saviors, and sons of God, according to history or tradition, have in past time descended from heaven and taken upon themselves to form of man. The gods came down and put himself in the womb. Clothing themselves with human flesh and furnishing incontestable evidence of a divine origin by various miracles, marvelous works, and superficial virtues, and finally these 20 Jesus Christs, parentheses, accepting their character for the name, laid the foundation or the salvation of the world, and ascended back to heaven. Here, they're listing at least 33 different stories that people have all around the world of this happening. Dr. Ben claims that the story of Jesus is just one of the latest. And where did this come from? The polytheism that was all through Africa. So he's telling you, we have documentation. You know it because you can go back to each of the polytheistic religions and you can find the gods. See the god Thor and everything they sent down. They sent down a male. They sent down females too. For some reason. And he or she, what did they tell you? Let me read it one last time and we end it. Exactly what happened to Jesus. They said, we got these stories, and these stories are still in the polytheism of all religions on earth. A savior coming down from the gods, transforming himself. Let me show you how it's done, and I'll end it.
Into flesh. From spirit to flesh.
20 messiahs, saviors, and sons of God, according to history or tradition, have in past times descended from heaven. That's where all the gods reside, with their husbands and wives and children. I ain't got no girlfriend, ain't no homosexuality here. You had babies. They're telling you, this is real. Thou said, man invented God. I can accept that. In past time, descended from heaven. A history of or tradition have in past time descended from heaven and taken upon themselves the form of men, clothing themselves with human flesh, and finishing incontestable evidence of a divine origin. By various miracles, marvelous works, and superlative virtues. You want to finish it out, Munderson?
And finally, these 20 Jesus Christ, accepting their character for the name, laid the foundation of the salvation of the world, and ascended back to heaven.
So Christian, that's why Dr. Ben tells us in his book, Africa, Mother of the Western Religions. These religions come out of Africa. Now, I can't say that, well, we know they're coming out of Africa, but all religions have this. All these religions got gods, gods have children, and the gods have always come down to work with. There's a god, I don't know the name, he may know, the god to come in to help women for pregnancy.
Beth.
Beth, the god. Huh?
Best and Twat.
Okay? Two goddesses to come down to help women, how to birth them and nurse them and stuff, because man needs help. Okay? So in what he's demonstrating is the different gods in Egypt is here. And so you can read the names, and when you read the names, it comes from, they listed here, most of these savior gods come out of Africa, come out of Asia, they all over. Okay, so the next time, we're going to deal with the polytheism. But we wanted to show you the 16 crucified saviors, to show you that this story that's in your Bible is an old one, that has been around for thousands of years. It's been part of the culture of most of the world. And when we begin to start reading from the Africans, and then we go into the Europeans, all kinds, you're going to see the same thing. Polytheism. And it's only, for some reason, Munderson, somebody only want to talk about the male come down, but the female was coming down, changing form. Without the female, you wouldn't have had birth.
Woot, Hathor, Isis, these females, they've been up there.
Yeah. When you're saying in the Bible, the golden calf, that's Hathor, coming in the form of a cow with nourishment with tears. Polytheism, she came down. But somebody wanted to concentrate on the male, talk about Jesus, but she was down there. All of them were there. All the gods that he tells you about in the temple, they were here. They all come down, change their form, and when he starts telling you, Munderson begins to tell you how they changed the form and they had to be fed, he's talking about polytheism. He set the foundation for what I'm going to continue by what he tells you what those gods did.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, he doesn't have that much time on the SD card. This is just going to be part one of Dr. Lewis's numerous series on Africa and the economy. He might do 15 sessions, it all depends, but give him a great big hand. We have more time on the SD card, we'll let him rip, so give Dr. a great big hand.
Okay, and to say this, when we get to the next section on the polytheism, then we're going to bring Munderson back to reinforce some of the relationship of the African gods and goddesses.
I'm going back to Egypt, so I won't be here till...
No, I'm just saying that you're a contributor because you're dealing, when you're talking to Egypt, he's talking polytheism. That's the whole thing about it, polytheism. And Doc said, man made it up. Go on.
Okay, you can add